Okay, as they set the table, we're going to go to the next panel, which is DPI Lessons from India for the World. Want to quickly introduce the moderator for this track, Shukla, a good friend, one of the Council of Trustees of TiE Silicon Valley, one of the original founders of TiE Angels, and he's the founder and general partner of Monte Vista Capital. Venk is also involved in the Indian ecosystem, and he was nominated as a member of the Government of India's Startup Advisory Council, chaired by the Commerce Minister of India. We also have Minoo Gupta, who is a seasoned tech-savvy and customer-focused executive working in Silicon Valley since '87. The two other panelists we have are Nikhil Bhaskar from Boston Consulting Group. He's a partner in the Silicon Valley office, and he works closely with 50 companies and startups to build and launch innovative solutions for patients, providers, and biopharma. Pranav Deshpande is the product marketing person at Vanta. He works as a product marketing manager there, having spent the past 8 years in GTM and product marketing roles at Twilio and Modern Treasury. He is also an early iSpurt volunteer, helping evangelize UPI and the India Stack in the US via events like Startup Bridge India and op-eds in publications like TechCrunch and VentureBeat.
Okay, we have been given, you see, a tight clock. Normally, when I grab mic, I grab the entire 30 minutes by myself. But we don't have that luxury today. So let's just get this thing kick-started right away. I think, I don't know how many of you listen to Dheeraj's stuff. It's one of the most lucid description that I've heard of the significance of what India has done. But I think we'll touch it from a different standpoint in this panel. So, but before we get started, I think it's worthwhile just to take a quick look at what digital public infrastructure really means, what it is, and then we'll talk about its significance. So let me ask Minoo to tell us what digital public infrastructure really means.
So I have a quick show of hands to see if you can recognize elements of digital public infrastructure. How many of you use internet? Okay, so the internet is the first of its kind an open digital infrastructure, and it's publicly available. None of us pay for it, right? So that's digital public infrastructure, which is available. So now, if you just take that idea and expand it further, and think about a digital public infrastructure to be an open system with a collection of applications, infrastructure, and various, protocols, if you want to call it, that are put together. So digital public infrastructure is set of these things even for India. So essentially what India did is they decided that in order to build this infrastructure, they will do it ground up. We just heard Dheeraj actually talk about it. So they first lay down the infrastructure as identity, which is Aadhaar. So Aadhaar is a set of identifiers that identifies an individual, and they rolled this out from, I think, 2006 to 2010 to everybody in the country. And that is 1.47 billion people, as the consensus was rolled out a couple of weeks ago, bigger than China. But they did that. And as soon as they did that, the government actually played a critical role in recognizing that many in the country don't have access to finance capabilities. So they worked with the banks, and they said, hey, every bank, you have to now help open these accounts. So that enabled financial inclusion for almost 460 million people who didn't have bank accounts before that. So identity was first, and then now that you have identity and you have bank accounts, the infrastructure went one further to say, now you're going to be able to transact and transfer money to create value on top of identity using payments. So that is the UPI, is the protocol that is used to transfer this money, and that is done at no cost. So in today, supposedly, India does more transactions every day than Visa and MasterCard put together in the entire world. So that is the volume that, Dheeraj also talked about that India is doing on the UPI payments. For me, the watershed moment for UPI was, and I don't know how many of you travel to India, there are a lot of beggars who come to your door asking for money. They now carry buckets with a UPI sticker and a QR code on them. so you know that the value has been created all the way to the bottom of the stack. So that's how much the penetration of UPI in the payment system has already had on the system. And on top of it...
But I don't know about it.
You didn't know about it?
No, I don't know about last trip to India in Delhi and Bombay, I didn't see a single beggar.
Oh, that's not true.
Okay. Really fancy
exactly. Yeah.
I saw a lot of people trying to sell me things. As soon as the car stopped at the intersection, there are people trying to sell me all kinds of things, books and flowers and this and that. But for the first time, I noticed not a single beggar, either in Delhi or in Bombay traffic stops.
I see the shani guy walking door to door taking oil.
That's not begging, that's spiritual.
Okay, all right. Thanks for correcting me, but that guy carries a QR code with him now. So it's anyway, the penetration is real, whether it's at the beggar level or whether it's a small business level. That's really value being created. And then on top of it is now when you're transacting money, you're obviously sharing some data with that. You're sharing data about who you are, what kind of payment you're making. We know that from our own use of Visa card and MasterCard. When we get the statement at the end of the month, it's like tells you everything you spent for. So that's how UPI is. So people who are transacting have the data available. So they are now creating a data layer on top of it, which will be available, the data will be available to ubiquitously to everybody to use on top of it. So that these three layers make up India stack, and all of this infrastructure is open and it's available to everybody. Has APIs, so anybody can integrate with it. So private companies, public companies can all work with it. For example, PhonePe and Google Pay are an example of private companies using the payment interface or UPI interface to create the small apps which enable the infrastructure. So I'm going to stop at that in interest of time, but that hopefully gives a sense.
No, I think this is good. I think we also have, luckily for us, I just discovered it, that Nikhil is not only part of Boston Consulting Group, he's the management consultant, so they think about these issues, but he actually worked in India, and he worked, with different ministries on building on top of this digital public infrastructure. So I think before you get on to the interesting work that you did, I think it will be worthwhile for us to hear why this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Why this is a big deal for a country.
Great question, Venk. I think, first disclaimer, I was born, brought up, raised in India, so I might talk with a sense of hyperbolism that please excuse me for it, but... but what's the real fuss about it, right? Like there is GPS and that's a public good. Google Maps got created, Uber got created, internet is there. It's not like, digital public infrastructure is a novel concept. But why is it so, what's the fuss about India doing some of these things? If you actually think about it, go back in the 1947 when partition was happening, we had this Canada session right now. It was like 50% of Canada moving borders and migrating in a matter of 2 years. That's the scale at which migration happened in this country. It's an old civilization, but a very young nation. And until late 50s, there were memos in the UK Parliament which said that India as a country will not even survive. It'll die as a country. There will be civil wars within the country and it will not survive. That was really the first innings of survival. What Minoo has been talking about and why there is just so much conversation around it is that now what you see in the last 10 years is emergence of new ways of problem solving, which can truly change the lives of people on the ground, not just for the top 1 billion, but for the next 6 billion as well. You know, Silicon Valley does a great job innovating for the first billion. Some of these innovations coming out of India can have a very big impact on the quality of life of the next 6 billion. Just to put it in numbers, India in 2013 did about 1% transactions online. As of 2022, 40% of all transactions were digital transactions. That's $1.7 trillion of money exchanged every single day, happening through a public system which has been created by the government, which is open source. On vaccines, you know, we don't talk about vaccines as much. India does vaccination of, there are 25 million babies that are born in India every year. About 24 million used to get vaccinated with many immunization records that are there and many immunization interventions. When COVID came in, with the same 40,000 vaccination centers, you were doing 2.4 million vaccinations on a single day. What took 1 year to do was happening on a single day with COVID without even a single penny being spent on expanding physical infrastructure. That's a 200x productivity improvement happening through this public infrastructure. Now imagine the amount of productivity, economic unlock that this can create on many sectors. You know, credits in India, it's very easy to underwrite a $1 million loan, very difficult to underwrite a $100 loan. There are 14 million small and medium enterprises in India which are now registered on another public good which is called as GSTN, which is an indirect tax interface. Some of this data can now be used to underwrite credit at a very low cost for many of these enterprises. The credit enrollment and the credit growth that's happening on indirect spend is about 16%. India's GDP is growing at 7%. So, you know, Dheeraj spoke about how India can potentially become a $7-8 trillion economy in the next 7 to 8 years. 16% increase in tax growth implies a lot more resources available for the country to build public goods that can then be used as a model of innovation, as a template of innovation in many of the other emerging markets in the world. So that's why some of this innovation is very critical and very big, because we have seen the Googles of the world, we have seen Microsofts of the world, we have seen Silicon Valley doing a great job for the first billion. But for the next billion, some of those same solutions are not a cut, copy, paste. Because the way money gets made, the way information gets transacted, and the way people move in the ecosystem and how trust is built is fundamentally different. And some of these models are a great example of both making money as well as building trust in social public goods.
So, you know, so this is such a crucial, critical sort of piece of infrastructure. Why is it that the rest of the world is not jumping onto it? Let's talk about US. What would it take? My personal story, if I have to send money to my nephew, I have to wire it. My bank charges me $25. There is a cutoff time. So to send my money to my nephew, it takes sometimes 2-3 days and I get charged for it. India, it doesn't happen. So why is this something which is of such a universal benefit? Tell me, give me your perspective, you see, on why countries like, what would it take for countries like US, and why is it not being adopted today?
Venk, it's quite obvious. There's expensive, and I'm speaking here more personally than representing a firm, but there is expensive lobbying capacity.
Yeah, there is going to be a lawsuit against BCG, what you say. Yeah.
So there is expensive capacity sitting there to lobby against some of this, right? Like creating friction creates opportunities to make money, and hence, which is why in many of the emerging markets, there is an opportunity to leapfrog. There is an opportunity to not go linearly where you have to change incentives of all the existing actors and get them to adopt a completely new technology. In India, none of that existed. There is, like, for example, if you talk about health, right now there are no digital records that get created. The government in India, and as BCG we were supporting that, is building a health stack. What it does is allows for health data to be interoperably exchanged, just the way you change money. It doesn't matter which bank account you use, money is the same color, it can be moved from one account to another. Same way your health data can move from silos of one provider to another provider. And because there aren't existing expensive capacity or frictions that are existing, there's an opportunity to leapfrog. Now, of course, through regulation, through creating self-governing bodies, self-regulating organizations, you can find ways in which the pie expands and individual organizations finding meaningful money-making value pools as well, but it's not easy for existing actors to simply adopt.
Okay, so there's not much room for optimism here, but I think the point here is that the smaller players or units of the government you see in their thing could adopt this thing, and I hope they do, because this is just an amazing sort of a gift, and it's available, it's freely available. And I was wondering, both of you could comment on that last question, George. This thing that, is there something unique about India? Why these kind of things, this kind of innovation, have not just innovation, but ability to sustain it for a long time, and then over time government adopting it across both political parties? Is this something unusual about India, or is this something replicable across the world?
So I'll take it and then I'll give it to you, Minoo. So very quickly, I think just demographics, right? You look at median age in Japan, it's 56. Median age in the US is in the 40s. Median age in China is late 30s. Median age in India is early 20s. And again, just youth brings in a certain level of rigor, energy to make it, how we saw our parents get raised in a certain environment and with a lot of constraint being available. And there is this whole need to make an impact, need to survive and do something, and that's what the political government is following. Some of these models you see very similar happening in Indonesia as well, in Philippines as well, in many African emerging markets as well, that you see very similar trends. But again, many of those countries don't need to reinvent it. Some of the models that have been built in India can potentially be replicated over there without the need to reinvent the wheel.
Your final thought.
Yeah, I think when I look at the economy of India, right, I think the scale is really, really big. Like, some of the states in India are bigger than many of the European countries. Right? So I think the infrastructure scale is really different, and they have to think differently. They have to think from building blocks. And India is lucky that there are technologists who are actually, many of them who have gone back from US to India, they are actually going to their roots and saying it's time to give back, pay it forward. I think that's culturally rooted in our philosophy, in our Vedas, in our, in just philosophically, we want to do good for others, right? So I think that mindset has driven some of this ecosystem that is built. I mean, you've been in this ecosystem long enough, and the core Aadhaar team was invited by Modi from the US to come and do this for the India.
Much
for Modi. Okay, all right.
4 years before Modi
corrected.
showed up.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
And
I stand corrected.
It was not a government initiative. It was Nandan Nilekani initiative, and he sold the government on the need for doing this, and the government, to its credit, supported that.
Yeah, so I think that's at the core of this, growth and this popularity of these ecosystems, because they are all working hand in hand for the goodness of the people.
I think there's something to be said about this this culture, right? I mean, the original Aadhaar team were all volunteers.
Correct.
All of them were US returned technologists who could have done anything. It could have made millions.
Yeah.
Because they had made millions before, they could keep doing what they were doing, but they didn't. And they just, and you know, but I think that thing, but also the government, regardless of which party it is, regardless of what ideology it is, both of them supported this.
Correct.
I think that also says something, see, about, you know, some wisdom, you see, of, you know, of the Indian mind.
Yeah, the policymakers are listening to the technocrats and not just paying attention to the bureaucrats. So that helps.
Okay, so George, within 1 minute of this thing, we completed this thing, and it was, at least to me, it was very educational and entertaining. Thank you.
Thank you.